The French Navy has intercepted an oil tanker coming from Russia. This is just the latest move in general efforts to enforce international sanctions against Moscow. French President Emmanuel Macron posted on X that the Tagor was boarded in the Atlantic. The French military released this footage, it says, shows the interdiction more than 700 kilometers off France's west coast. The seizure was conducted with assistance from the United Kingdom. Ukraine's allies are attempting to rein in the so-called shadow fleet of tankers evading sanctions. France has stopped several other vessels over the past year. In March, it worked with Belgian authorities to halt one in the North Sea, seen here. Well, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Russia considers actions like Sunday's seizure to be illegal.
We consider such actions illegal. They border on international piracy. We absolutely disagree that they are carried out in full compliance with international law. You know that Russia is taking a number of measures to ensure the safety of its cargo and will continue to do so, taking into account, shall we say, this negative experience.
Break this down now with Olaf Böhnke. He's Germany director of Rasmussen Global. That's a geopolitical advisory firm. Olaf, does the seizure of this oil tanker signal a shift in the way NATO countries are going after Russia's shadow fleet?
Yes, this clearly signals a shift from sanctions on paper to sanctions in practice. This is way overdue, to be very honest. For years, Europe focused very much on listing vessels instead of actually stopping them, which allowed Russia to adapt. But now, finally, this is an important step, but it comes quite late.
The Kremlin calls the seizure illegal, saying it borders on piracy. Do such seizures pose a significant legal risk for the countries involved?
There is some legal risk, and Russia will use this argument politically, as we have seen. But this is not piracy. It's a much more assertive use of existing legal tools. So these actions are not arbitrary. They rely on maritime law. And for example, when vessels fly under false flag, then you are in a position on international sea that you can intercept here. That's what the French did, and this was also what President Macron actually referred to. The same goes for security features, or if you have doubt in your documentation. But the one reason is we know that more than 200 cargo ships are passing by European borders on a monthly basis, and only for really a handful you can adapt those legal instruments. So it's the right way, but it's hard actually to implement those legal elements.
Well, presumably countries like France and the UK, which was involved in this interception as well, they feel to be on stronger legal footing than they were maybe a few months ago. Do you expect to see similar seizures then going forward?
Yeah, I think so we can see a pattern emerging. The European Council member states already discussed this in October, that they need to change their approach to the shadow fleet. And now finally, from previously isolated individual actions, as we have seen from some states, the Swedes in the Baltic Sea, France also in the Mediterranean Sea. So we now actually see a much more coordinated pattern here, including the United Kingdom, which is important. And I think this is also to increase the pressure on Moscow here, that Europe is finally, again, it's overdue, finally adapting to Russia's strategy here.
And finally, how effective do you think these operations, these seizures could be in disrupting Russia's oil exports?
I mean, it will not stop the flow, that's for sure, but it will increase the cost and also increase friction. And I think the reactions from Mr. Peskov we've seen is an indication for this. So you could also see recent statements by Vladimir Putin, so seeing that the Ukraine is maybe not having the upper hand at the battlefront, but at least so you can see that Russia is coming under significant pressure here, and the cost for the war maybe is changing the calculation of Vladimir Putin. We'll see, but this is definitely an overdue step for Europe actually to take action.
Olaf, thank you very much for talking with us today. That was Olaf Böhnke, Germany Director of Rasmussen Global.
Well, for more now, I'm joined by Stephen Wills. He's a former U.S. Navy officer and a maritime strategy expert at the Navy League of the United States. Mr. Wills, it's good to have you with us. You just heard the Kremlin spokesman there. Russia says that this interdiction was illegal. Are those, empty words, bluster, or is there a threat to be taken seriously?
I think it's a great deal of bluster. We've seen this consistently whenever a Russian shadow fleet vessel has been boarded. And a number of stories have indicated that this particular vessel was originally flying one flag, a Madagascar national flag, and when intercepted by the French, it was flying a Cameroonian flag. And by the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea, Article 92, that is blatantly illegal according to international law. You cannot change flags in the middle of a voyage. And in fact, the UN Law of the Sea encourages nations to take action and actually board and confirm the nationality, confirm the cargo and what's going on board ships like this that execute this kind of behavior. So this is well within international law here, and I believe the Russians to be quite incorrect and blustering in this case.
Is there more to be read into this situation? Do you think we're looking at a shift in how NATO countries go after Russia's shadow fleet?
Yeah, this is a good thing. More and more countries are seeking to interdict these shadow fleet vessels. We all have a vested interest in preventing this. In many cases, these shadow fleet vessels are elderly. They're in poor material condition. Their crews, in some cases, while not being slaves aboard, were in some cases impressed aboard. So they have very sketchy crew arrangements. They change national flags frequently. So these vessels are a danger to others on the high seas. They're a danger when they put into port potentially. So it's within everyone's interest to board these ships and verify what's going on. And you're seeing more and more nations do this, and I think that's a good thing.
And, as you said, this is probably bluster that we're seeing coming from the Kremlin. But if Russia were to start escorting these ships, for example, or challenging these interdictions, would that increase the risk of this becoming some sort of a naval standoff?
That would certainly be an escalatory measure, I would agree. But again, Russia isn't standing on any kind of solid international law here. It's definitely in defiance of Article 92. So I'm not sure what they would stand on. They'd be better off being honest, actually, and flagging the vessels as Russian flag ships. And then, why bother to shift their flag in mid-voyage? So I don't think the Russians have a lot to stand on here. They've done this consistently as other nations have intercepted shadow fleet vessels. It's the same complaint. It's the same bluster. But yet we have not seen any changes. And it's unclear if the Russians have enough vessels in their various, very widely geographic dispersed fleets to execute some kind of escort mission on a more lengthy basis.
Is it possible then that the story here is not what the Russians are doing, but perhaps what the Europeans are doing? Instead of making threats, instead of saying these are the sanctions, what we're seeing here is actual action to enforce something. I mean, this is Europe talking the talk and walking the walk.
Yeah, absolutely. And more countries are starting to take action against these shadow fleet vessels. This is a problem that's been addressed in numerous international locations. I sat in on a Greek event back in January of this year that discussed shadow fleet vessels, and the Russian representative there stomped his foot and was very unhappy about all this and left the event before anyone had a chance to ask him any questions. So I don't think they're standing on firm ground here. I think more and more nations are starting to realize this throughout Europe and throughout the world and see that we all have a vested interest in reining in these ships because they're dangerous and they have the potential to cause great harm. Several years ago, there was a Russian flag vessel that put into port in Beirut carrying toxic cargo. The cargo got lost and eventually was stored in a in a storage shed without proper constraints. It was a fertilizer-like cargo. And then there was an explosion that killed numerous people in the Beirut dockyard areas. You may remember that. And caused a lot of damage. We all have a vested interest in containing these.
Where does the United States fit into this? I mean, if this were to escalate further, does it become a broader NATO maritime mission? And what would that mean then for global shipping security?
That's an interesting question. We'll see how this develops. The United States has also been enforcing these regulations. As we know, the United States is not a signatory to the UN Convention on Law of the Sea, but generally abides by and enforces, 99.99% of its regulations and rules. So we'll see where it goes. If it becomes a question of Russian ships escorting these vessels, that could certainly be escalatory, and it might escalate things at sea. And when things escalate at sea, it's harder because it's more out of sight. It's not something that's directly seen, and we've seen this historically, where when things go escalatory at sea, they don't immediately get seen. So we should all keep an eye on this issue. Hopefully this doesn't rise to that level where you have competing escorts and competing boarding evolutions. As you know, as you saw from the video, these are very dangerous operations at sea, whether you're boarding any kind of a ship from a helicopter or a small boat. A serious danger for those doing the boarding. But they're well trained. Everybody's Navy does this, and they seem to be doing a good job so far.
Stephen Wills, we appreciate your time and your insights tonight on this story. Thank you.
Thanks for allowing me to join you. Appreciate it.